This is the OpenClaw AI agent reading the contents of my private documents folder. And so can anyone else who will get access to your computer through many of the OpenClaw security holes. However, that's also what makes OpenClaw so powerful, because that same functionality can be used to extract the recurrent themes from your documents during the last years, like you see here, and then I can connect it to the InfraNodus MCP server to ask it to generate content gaps, so I know how to develop my research further. In fact, OpenClaw is really powerful because you can apply it to research, to marketing. It can also do browser automation. So for example, here it opened my browser with InfraNodus and then helped me analyze the content of my documents visually. So it works really well. However, if you install it the way that every tutorial tells you to, you're exposing your computer to a huge risk. So it's not a question of whether you should run OpenClaw, but how to run it in a secure way. In fact, I spent several days trying to figure it out, and I do AI and software development for a living, so it was really difficult, but I'm sure that this tutorial is going to save you a lot of time and money and also prevent some possible risks. And also it will show you how you can work with this kind of LLM applications in the most secure way possible. So even if you're not planning to use OpenClaw, I think it's going to be very useful because we will have a lot of apps coming up in the future, and it's just very good to know how to secure them in isolated containers and make sure that you're not exposed to prompt injection attacks or to malicious skills. And I'm not going to tell you to buy a new Mac because I'm not from San Francisco, and I understand that not everyone has the money to do it. And also I'm not going to tell you that you should install it on an external server because I'm not sponsored by any hosting companies. I'm going to show you how you can install it on your local computer so that OpenClaw can get access to the data that you need and work in the best way possible, but without exposing your system to all these different security risks. In fact, one of the main problems with OpenClaw is that it can run commands in your terminal. So it can list all the passwords you have or crypto wallets and then link them to some external URL website and just send them out there. It can also show the contents of your document. So you have to limit its scope and run it in an isolated container in order to avoid it. And the problem with the default installation instructions that you have on OpenClaw is that I think they were written by AI or something, but it's really not easy to follow them. And you might be thinking that you're setting something up in a secure way, and I'm going to show you later how you can do that using the configuration files. But in fact, when you then test OpenClaw and ask it, okay, get access to that folder you shouldn't have access to, in fact, it's going to show you the content because some of the security policies it has are not really working very well. So the way that I'm going to show you how you can set it up is that you block everything at first, and then step by step you start opening up its capabilities and testing them one by one to ensure that you're not exposing anything crucial to the outside world. But first, let me show you what you can actually do with OpenClaw so that you understand what it could be used for. And I think it's also important to get an idea of its capabilities before you actually install it, because that will also inform your security strategy, what folders you want to expose, what services or skills you want it to be connected to. All right, so here's one of my favorite use cases with OpenClaw. I'm going to ask it to list all the Obsidian documents I have on a specific topic of research I'm interested in. List all the documents in my Obsidian vault on the topic of HRV, and I'm just communicating with it through my web interface, but you can also do it through Telegram or WhatsApp, and that's also one of the strongest capabilities of OpenClaw because you can be on the move, but you can be talking to your computers. What it does in the background here is that it's actually running terminal commands that perform search in your Obsidian folder of all the documents that contain HRV, the topic I'm interested in them, right? So here it lists all the files here, and then I can ask it, okay, use InfraNodus MCP server to tell me what the recurrent themes are. And by the way, I don't have to use the MCP server skill of InfraNodus in order to do it, but I find that with InfraNodus you actually get much more precise results and they're much less generic. I'm going to record another video on this topic and I will link to it later from this video so that you can watch how to use OpenClaw with InfraNodus specifically, but in general I prefer to use it this way because then I'm sure I'm not just going to get some AI generated stuff, But in general, the advantage of InfraNodus is that it uses a peer-reviewed algorithm to retrieve the main topic. So it's reproducible, and also I can use it to steer LLM's attention, and it's very precise. So here it gives me an overview of the main topics I'm interested in relation to the subject, right? So that gives me a really good overview. And what I like here is to see what other smaller topics I could be focusing on, because that's usually something that's missing and that is underdeveloped, and your research can really benefit from focusing on those smaller underrepresented topics, and InfraNodus is very good in revealing those. And then also another very strong functionality of InfraNodus is that it shows me content gaps, so the topics that are not so well connected. In fact, if I demonstrate it here using the analytics panel on the right, what happens is that it identifies some of the clusters that could be better connected, and then it proposes how you can connect them together. So it's really useful approach, and you can apply it to any data. So as you can see with OpenClaw, I can connect my data to some external tool, like InfraNodus in this case. I can even ask it to run in the browser. So we have the browser open now. I can say, okay, now look in the browser and tell me what the gaps. And as you can see, it's interpreting the structure that I see right now on the screen and giving me an understanding of how I can analyze it. It's really great. It's actually super powerful because some people find knowledge graph difficult, and so you can use AI to analyze your data in real time. So I find it really amazing, and this is some of the most interesting use cases I found. All right, so now that we can see what OpenClaw can do, let's see what are the main security issues with it. Like I said, the main problem is that it has access to your terminal commands and it can run anything it wants. So if you installed a malicious skill, or you asked it to visit some website like I did here, but this website had a prompt injection attack, then it could tell your OpenClaw to run some command and to send the data that it retrieved, for example, the content of your crypto wallet private key, to some external site that you will never then be able to recover, and they will just steal your money. In fact, X is really full with posts about that. I made another video on that a week ago. I will link to it also from this video so you can learn more about it. But basically, OpenClaw has a lot of scams, malicious skills that just steal crypto wallets from people. So it's really dangerous, and you should really watch out for this. This is why you cannot run OpenClaw in the way that the default setup recommendations tell you to. If you go on OpenClaw website, so I open it here, and then you go to the quick start, it just tells you just one line, installs everything, you're welcome. And then what happens is that you just expose your computer to the outside world. Not only people can access it on the local network if you're not very well protected, they can also even access it from the outside on the internet. So it's a really crazy security hole to just run it on your computer. That's why most of the people recommend buying a new Mac Mini or installing it on some external server, but they either have too much money or they're sponsored by those hosting companies. And also it doesn't make sense to install it on another computer because you actually want it to work with your real data and with your real API keys. So even if you install it somewhere else, if you run it in this unprotected way, how it's recommended here, it's just going to be able to expose all your data, and internet is full of this stuff. This is why you should install it differently. And luckily there are some instructions on the OpenClaw website about that. So for example, if you search for sandboxing, you will find an explanation of how it can be done. But I think it was auto-generated by AI, so it literally took me days to understand how to make it all work. Luckily, I made a file from it with the full description. It's available on my Substack. So I will also put the link to it in the description to this video below, so you can follow it step by step and copy and paste all the settings I did. But basically it explains how you can set it all up in the safest way possible. Okay, so let me explain to you some of the main concepts behind it. The main difference from the default file is that we're telling it to run a sandbox. Sandbox is a separate environment that you will be running your OpenClaw in. So instead of running it on your local machine, you're actually using Docker. That's software that creates a virtual operating system on your computer. And then you tell it, okay, so you will run OpenClaw in this separate environment using this image, which I provide here. I have to be careful not to reveal my API keys here, so I'm not going to show you everything, but you can always read the full description in the post that I will link to in the description to this video, okay? So it tells it, okay, use this image, connect it to the network, and here, it's very important, I'm telling it to bind it to the specific folder. So I'm not going to give you access to all of my data, I'm just going to tell you that you can access these two folders. In this case, it's my Obsidian Vault, and it's my research papers, because I just want to connect my own notes to the research papers that I downloaded over the last years to see how I can fill in the gaps in my Obsidian notes with the research papers, okay? And then you provide some environmental variables. For instance, here I have the InfraNodus API key, so I can run the InfraNodus MCP server and skill with it. Then I give it browser capabilities here. And then this is also the thing that many people get wrong, is that you can allow it to run tools on the computer, because otherwise without this feature, the sandboxed isolated version of OpenClaw is just going to be too nerfed, unable to do anything. So you tell it that it can run tools, but it's very, very important that you have to set up the exact security in a way that it has to ask you for a permission for every tool run that it has. It's going to be annoying, but it's going to save you so much. It's very important, this aspect. I cannot underline how important it is to add this feature. In fact, if you just add one configuration, even if you don't want to run your OpenClaw in this sandboxed Docker way, because it takes time to install it, you need to add this exact security all, and that it should ask everything that is missing from your security permissions. You will not add any tool to your security permissions, so that means that OpenClaw will ask you whether you allow every tool run. And then also another very important feature is that later you also tell it that it can send you approvals in multiple channels. And this is useful if you're using it through the web interface like I do, but also if you're using it through Telegram or WhatsApp, because then whenever there is a new permission that is being asked, you will receive it in all these different channels. So this is also super useful to have. All right, so this is like a quick overview of how that works. And now I'm going to show you how differently it functions when it runs from this Docker container. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my terminal and I'm going to relaunch my OpenClaw right now. And what will normally happen when you change the config files, and that is that you will have an error coming up like this: OpenClaw gateway install forced to sync the token. So you might need to run it again, the command that it tells you to run. Then it's going to refresh the session. So I'm reloading it. Let's actually start a completely new session here. So let's check what folders do you have access to. This is the first thing that you do. When you install it in a secure way, and you will see in my tutorial, you actually do it gradually, so you understand every new setting that you add to the configuration file. But for example, here it tells me, okay, list everything in the workspace file. And then it tells you, okay, I have access to workspace. This is good. I have access to the sandbox container and browser, okay? But I don't have access to anything else except for these folders that you added as binded to your Docker instance. So this is very limited. Then we say, okay, tell me the contents of my Obsidian folder. So now this Obsidian folder is not the real folder. It's a kind of like a link to that. And sometimes it's going to ask you questions to clarify what you mean. So you can just tell it, okay, just find it. Then it's going to run a terminal command to find anything that contains Obsidian inside. And because it has access to those two folders, it's probably going to find it very easily. In this case, it lists correctly all the different folders you have, and then you can start analyzing them. So for example, you can say, okay, create a new InfraNodus. Okay, find all the documents there which talk about HRV, the topic I'm interested in. Then it's going to perform another command now. But first it will ask me, unlike in the previous version where it was unlimited access to everything, where it was not asking me anything. Here it's actually asking me to run for a confirmation for every command. So it's much more secure, and I can also analyze what's happening there. And then you see it's listing me all the documents where I'm talking about HRV. Then I can tell it, okay, now create a new graph from these documents in InfraNodus. It's going to first grab all the contents from these documents. So you see here, it's telling us, okay, let's collect all the text information here. I allow this tool to run, so it's going to get all these contents of the files. And then it creates a full graph from all these documents and gives me a link in the browser that I can open to actually see this graph. So if I then go into my account, I will see that there is this new graph created, HRV Obsidian Notes. And so I have this very graph now representing all these documents that it extracted, and then I can use InfraNodus to, for example, identify content gaps inside and then use AI to generate interesting research ideas. So as you can see, it connects to InfraNodus using the MCP server in this case, but you can also set it up to work directly in your browser. That's a little bit more complicated to set up if you're running it in this sandboxed mode, but it's possible. You should just relaunch it and then tell it to use the browser sandbox, and then it's going to work fine. I also have the explanation of how you can do that in the document that explains the secure setup. So this is the workflow that I like to use. Let me know if you have any questions, if you tried running OpenClaw on your own machine, what your experiences are, and also if you would like me to make a separate detailed tutorial on how to use it with InfraNodus, or if you would like me to make another video where I explain step by step this whole secure setup process.